Hello, chatters.
Chatty chat chats.
Chatty chat chats.
How are we?
Hopefully good.
I don't even know because I can't hear you.
Yeah. But tell us.
Tell us.
Welcome to one extra story, one extra bonus little chat about contempt. Hot topic. It's been a heavy one.
Yeah, it has, but it's been a good one. Like we said in the other episode, it's so good to have these conversations and to look through these things because it's good to check. You know, it's a good checkpoint of like, all right, how are we going? Are we getting too jokey? Are you saying things that are unsaid? Do you know what I mean? Like you said, you've mentioned before, if I don't bring things up, the conversation's still happening and it's going to be loud, right? If I don't use my verbal communication, the conversation's still going to happen and it's going to be loud. Yeah. That can all sort of lead to contempt, right? So check in. How are we going with that? Is there things that you haven't said that you need to say? Is there things that we need to work through that we haven't worked through? So it's been good topics, heavy but good.
Yeah, well, we got one more story for you guys, and this one is my 25 male marriage has been overtaken by contempt, hoping to hear from others who have been able to defeat this terrible monster and actually be happy again. I've barely been married a year, and my marriage is already hanging on by a thread. I love my wife, and I believe that she loves me, but it is painfully obvious that her love has been buried deep by contempt for me, and probably vice versa to an extent. It is to the point where she does not respect me and has no problem saying whatever she feels to me in the nastiest way possible. We still have some good days, but I feel like I'm walking on eggshells, hoping a landmine doesn't explode. I'm cognizant. Amy and speaking tonight has not been great. I'm cognizant of all of this and willing and am actively trying to turn it around. She has expressed to me that she doesn't think anything will change and has given up. My main transgression in the relationship has been failing to make her and what she wants a priority, and I have also had a bad habit of trying to control things that threaten me by putting them down, which often makes her feel small or beat down. I know this has really hurt her, and I'm aware of it now and do my best to never do it anymore, but maybe the damage is done. I really believe there's enough left that we could work it out and be happy, but I don't know how to get past the mountain of proving this to her and getting her out of the rut of having given up. I feel the pressure is on me to be perfect, never miss a chore or make a badly worded comment, etc., lest all my progress crumble back to nothing. It is exhausting at times to remain motivated when she lashes out and treats me poorly. It takes all my strength to keep compassion as the thing I feel most towards her. I just want a happy, loving wife that respects and enjoys me and cherishes me the way I do her. I'm certainly not perfect, but I have a lot to offer and don't feel like this is too much to ask. Is there any hope that this can be achieved given the current state? Has anyone been there and come back, and how? The one thing on my side is time. We recently moved overseas for work and we're committed to being here for 2 years. Barring one of us becoming murderous towards the other, we will at least stick it out while we are here and reevaluate at that point. I want to do everything I can to make that evaluation not even necessary. Thank you for listening.
It's so hard, especially like, oh man, you know, in your first year and you're having these troubles, like it is quite hard. But again, you and I relate. You've mentioned to me that there's times where you just haven't felt like you've been the priority or you've taken up that much space in your brain. In my brain.
That I've taken up space in your brain.
That's it?
Yeah.
So from that perspective of hearing you share about that and how hurtful that can be, so I can understand that. I feel like what he needs to do in this situation, and I feel like what I've had to do in my situation, is commit to the commitment, commit to the change, commit to working on it, address it. This is where I want to be. I identified this and these are the things I'm going to do about it. And if she is the priority, you've mentioned what's been helpful for you is me to say how you're the priority and how that's been the case, because otherwise if he's like, no, you are the priority.
It's just words.
It's just words. Yeah. And even if he does say how, that's fine, but he needs to show.
Yeah,
she needs to see that. It's not the excuse of the contentment. I think she needs to work out how to communicate to him what she actually needs. I feel like for a lot of couples, well, some couples that we've heard from have been talking about how the communication, they just don't know how to have that communication. So it's a matter of they need to know what I want, you know, and I just want them to know what I want. Like, that's not going to happen. You know, you need to have those communications to start with. And some of them have even said, I don't even know what I want, you know, and that's great you have identified that, you know what I mean? But the fact is that you've identified something, and that's where you go in the conversation, but you go into that conversation together.
Yeah.
And as we mentioned in the episode that we've just recorded, you know, for a lot of what we're working on through here, we've got to rock up 100% of our own things. So if I'm struggling with this, if I'm coming from his perspective, if I'm not making you feel like a priority, I need to own that and take responsibility of that 100%. But in a team environment, my growth has been 50% me and 50% you. I have to 100% own my role and my responsibilities, but the beauty of the team is that you help amplify that, you know? So I think that's really important, is you identifying where you're at. If it's with, I don't really know, I would come to you as like, I want to know, but I don't know. And so, like, can we put things in place to help us discover what I need? You know what I mean? But I'm the one responsible. I'm not going to wait for you to organize or come up with ideas or whatever else that it looks like. I'm going to put things in place to help us help me.
Yeah, I think as well, it's really important to recognize they've only, how long?
A year.
They've been married a year, barely, and they've moved overseas. And so that's a lot of stress and change within 1 year. So it makes sense to me that they're not in a great place, that they're having some teething issues and there's stuff going on. I think it's really important to have a lot of grace for each other there. And I also think, you know, you've moved overseas. I have no idea where to, but there's a chance that they haven't moved somewhere with community around them.
Yeah.
And so in your first year of marriage, it's such a huge time. Ideally, you're surrounded by people inputting into your relationship, encouraging your relationship, strengthening your relationship, keeping you accountable. But if you've moved somewhere overseas where you don't have that community, you may not have that input. And so being aware of where you're at and recognizing, okay, we've had a lot of change. We've had a lot of things happen within a small, and getting married in general is just stressful and huge an adjustment anyway. Not getting so disheartened so quickly is really important. And you know, I have no idea who they are. I don't know what kind of prep they've done for their marriage, but like communication awareness before and in the beginning of your marriage is so big. You're learning how to communicate. I don't know if they've had people speak into that space, but it could be really valuable to be getting some counseling, to be getting some just people that are tracking with you, people that you respect their opinions on, just to track and be like, yeah, actually, no, we had the same thing. We had the same thing. We wrestled with that too. And the beginning of marriage is tough and you're learning all these things, because it sounds to me like she's just like, something's happened and she's given up. She's like, it's not working. It's failing. It's falling apart. It's not even a year in and all these things have happened to change. There's so much time to rebuild. Like we mentioned in the first episode too, the antidote to contempt is recognizing your feelings, your experiences, what you need in those times, and communicating that, but also fostering a culture of appreciation and admiration within your relationship. And so putting those little things in place rather than focusing on, oh, it's done, whatever, but being able to like bring in a culture of admiration and build that into your foundation of your marriage is huge and could turn this around.
Well, one thing I was going to mention too is moving overseas. So she probably feels a little bit not betrayed, but like not secure with him.
Yeah.
Moving overseas, that's huge, you know, a different culture. No matter, even if we move to New Zealand, right? New Zealand and Australian culture is it's nearly identical, but it's not identical. So we would still have a whole transition period of moving from Melbourne to a rural town was huge for us. Like that was massive, right? So in that, if she doesn't feel that she's a priority to him, she could feel very lost and alone and scared a little bit, maybe, you know, like it's like this whole new thing. And I was meant to be here with you, but I'm not here with you. I'm here by myself. And so there could be a whole level of that too, which would be feeding into it.
Yeah.
Again, that's where they've just got to have the conversation. How old are they? 25?
He's 25, yeah.
That's still quite young, you know, and for them to be moving overseas in that, I feel like there's going to be a dependency among them, and they've got to work through that. They've got to work through the conversation so they can identify all the things that are going on, and then they can start putting things in place.
Yeah. I think as well, if this wasn't always the case, if this is new, which I'm assuming it is, because why would you get married if you weren't in a good place? So if it's new within the last year, having that conversation and being curious, like, where does this come from? Like, what's changed for you? I wonder if he's done that. If it's like, if he's actually sat down and tried to explore that with her.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like something's happened for her. And it could be just a mixture of all the things we've said, being overwhelmed by all of that and feeling alone and stuff. Or it could be that he's done something or not done something in this first year that she expected or didn't expect. And anyway, having that space for curiosity would be really helpful.
Yeah.
As we said, focusing on what you admire, focusing on the positive times, reflecting back on your history is a really important thing. And since this is so new, you have so much positive stuff to reflect on. Unless something really bad, abusive or like betrayal or something's happened, you have positive stuff to reflect on to rebuild your foundation. And I reckon be huge.
Yeah. I was chatting to a friend of mine recently. He's just changed jobs. He was a manager of a big company and he went overseas for 6 weeks because his wife was originally from overseas. They went overseas to see their family. So he had 6 weeks off and they sat down and he was saying about how he has finally reconnected with his family essentially because they're on holidays for such a long period of time, where he's like the first week, he's like, you need more than a week holiday to really break out of work mode. Yeah. No, I get that. I just had last week off, but my mind is still on work stuff because I know what's coming to me the next week, right? A week isn't long. But like when you're off for 6 weeks, you really switch off. Like it takes the first week and a half, 2 weeks to work, get that out of your head. Then the next 4 weeks to a month is just with your family. He was talking about how through that, it just showed him how important or how much he didn't neglect his family, but he wasn't present with his family. He was always working. He had a lot of things to do. He was trying to be the best worker, the best manager, and the best dad and the best husband. And you can't do it all. So while he was overseas, while he was on holiday, him and his wife sat down and they wrote down, all right, these are all the things that we're going to do differently when we come home. So he's now left his job. They've sold their house. So they had a bigger property with a bit of land. They sold their house and they're moving into town because that means less maintenance on the property. It means that he isn't like working so much.
Awesome.
They love their property, but it doesn't line up with their values. So they sat down, they wrote down the values that they wanted together, and the house didn't line up with those values. The job didn't line up with those values. And so he's changing it all because he's saying what I've been missing is not worth, like this job, this house is not worth it. And I see the same here too. And again, if this was us, if we were in this situation, and again, chatting to my mate about his situation, what I would want to be doing is taking that time, and I've said this to you as well, like if you've said to me, like, I just don't feel like we're connecting or whatever, I'm like, all right, let's take 2 weeks. Let's just spend 2 weeks where it's like there's, whatever that looks like, no TV or no whatever else, like no phones or whatever it might be. Let's cut it out and we're going to just have that time, that dedicated time to reconnect again. And I feel like sometimes in these situations, that's what's needed is that dedicated time. If she doesn't feel that she's a priority, be a priority, and we're going to take 2 weeks and this is going to be a priority. But then you're going to be like, well, how is this going to last? You take that time, you sit down, you write your values. What needs to change for your values to be met? Your relationship values, not even just life values, your relationship values. And then based on your relationship values, life values, but not the other way around. Because I think the other way around is like, well, what about my work is conflicting with my family and there's too many conflicts. What I think is that we have to have our most immediate relationships and the values there and the home. That's sorted out first, and everything else is based from that, not the other way around. Because the family, if it's tied in with everything else, it gets neglected. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was actually really cool, and just how drastically he changed his
radical
stuff to suit. He's just like, yeah, it's not worth it. And I would say to these guys too, if they were listeners, I would say, all right, is this worth it? Like, is your work, is your living overseas or whatever it is that's causing these issues, is it worth it? I don't think so.
No. I saw someone post the other day about how, I think they're a hospice worker or something, And they said that the two things that people always say at the end of their lives is that they wish they hadn't worked so hard and they wish that they hadn't cared so much about what everyone else thought. And that's really it. Like at the end of the day, you know, you do that whole project 5 years from here now. But you could do a flip side of that story and be like, in 10 years' time, you've lost your wife, you're working, blah, blah, blah. You're looking back, was it worth it? Like, is that what you want to have done? Like, and I feel like sometimes we feel stuck. Like we're like, yeah, she's really wrestling. Oh, but work's really wrestling. You have to put a line. Like you have to get to the point where you're like, cool, there's hard things and we balance things. You don't just drop everything because all the time because things aren't going well. But there has to be that understanding that your priority is where your priority is, and you need to figure that out. Yeah, that's crazy. It's a cool story.
Yeah, I was so encouraged by it for sure. And
Awesome.
that takes guts.
Yep.
It takes guts to make those sorts of calls. And, you know, they're a family, they got kids, they got all that. It sounds very scary, but what they've done is great.
Yeah.
And encouraging, inspiring.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for another episode of Chatters. Really appreciate it. And we will catch you next week.
See you.
Good chat.